entire meeting. So I know it's 10 a.m. everyone, but we are waiting on Vice Chair Kareem, who is taking over as chair this meeting. So it'll be a few more minutes. Okay.
Morning.
Good morning, Steve.
How are you?
We have all expected board members whenever you are ready.
Can you repeat that? I didn't.
We have all our expected board members now, so we can start whenever you are ready.
Okay, give me 1 minute and we'll get going. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to call to order the November 18th Board of Directors meeting of Mountain Line, and the time is 10:01. And I'll ask our clerk to take the roll call, please.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the board. Jim McCarthy, City of Flagstaff.
Here.
Coconino County, Art Babbitt may join towards the end of the meeting, we were told. City of Flagstaff, Jamie Leland.
Present.
NAU, Josh Mayer.
Present.
And CCC, Steve Pruitt.
Present.
We do have some guests on the line. DC, Ramon Alatorre, and Penny Neiman from City of Flagstaff. Are you guys there?
Welcome.
Yeah, DC's here.
Good morning, this is Jenny.
Thank you. We
Great.
have our legal counsel, Mitesh Patel, on the line.
Good morning, everyone.
And we have Lieutenant Brian Silvernail from Yavapai County Sheriff's Office also on the line.
Hi, good morning.
I have to leave. Our fire alarm just went off in the building. So can I ask Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Chair Whelan to take over for me?
I'd be happy to.
I'll be right back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Rhonda, are you are you good with?
We're good to proceed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, Sam, safety minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. November's Safety Minute is regarding the importance of wearing a seatbelt. Seatbelts save lives every day. They can only save lives, however, if they are used. And there are still many people in America who do not buckle up. Wearing a seatbelt can reduce the risk of a fatal injury by 45% in an auto accident. This is why our community needs to know that wearing a seatbelt can make a difference between life and death. The Thanksgiving holiday is a kickoff to the busiest season of the year. With all the rushing around and holiday travel, it's a great time to remind motor vehicle drivers and passengers to buckle their seatbelts. To keep drivers and their passengers safe, Mountain Line is partnering with the U.S. Department of Transportation's National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, to share an important life-saving reminder: buckle up every trip, every time. Thanksgiving weekend, millions of Americans will hit the roads eager to spend time with family and friends. It's one of the busiest travel times of the year, and unfortunately, that means more crashes. NHTSA is reminding everyone that seatbelts save lives. Buckling up gives you your best defense against injury or death in a crash. In 2018, there were 22,697 passenger vehicle occupants killed in traffic crashes in the United States. Of those who were killed, 47% were not wearing seatbelts. NHTSA estimates that the seatbelt saved the lives of 14,995 passenger vehicle occupants aged 5 and older in 2017, according to the latest data available. If everyone had worn their seatbelts on every trip that year, an additional 2,549 lives could have been saved. The facts do not lie. When you wear your seatbelt as a front seat occupant of a passenger car, your risk of fatal injury goes down by 45%. For light truck occupants, that risk is reduced by 60%. So let's make this Thanksgiving different from years past. Thank you and welcome to the November board meeting.
Thank you so much, Sam. We'll move on to agenda item number 4. Directors, I'm looking for approval of the minutes from 9/16/20 and 10/21/20. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, this is Jim McCarthy. I could make a motion.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I move to approve the regular meeting minutes of September 16th, 2020, and the Board and TAC Strategic Policy Advance minutes of October 21, 2020.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion on the minutes or the motion? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item. I'm sorry, I just lost my agenda. Got it. Okay. This is the consent part of the agenda. All matters under consent agenda are considered by the Board of Directors to be routine and will be enacted by a single motion approving the consent agenda. If discussion is desired on any particular consent item, that item will be removed. Do I have a motion to approve item number 5, consider the FY 2020 annual report?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda. Well, I guess consent item.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, McCarthy.
Thank you, Jim. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that passes. We're on the discussion and action items, number 6. Kate, do you have a presentation for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to quickly introduce Ramon DC Alatorre with the City of Flagstaff, who's going to give us a presentation on the climate emergency. And I think this is really important conversation for Mountain Line because transportation is approximately 40% of the emissions. And so if we're going to make improvements in our climate, then we have to make improvements in the transportation sector. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to DC.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you to the board. I am also joined today by Jenny Neiman from the sustainability section. So thank you, Jenny, for joining. I am pleased today to have the opportunity to talk to the board and to everyone watching about the Climate Emergency Declaration. My name, again, is Ramon DC Alatorre. I'm the Climate and Energy Coordinator at the City of Flagstaff. As many of you are probably aware, on June 23rd, 2020, the Flagstaff City Council unanimously adopted a Climate Emergency Declaration resolution. And the language in the resolution was drafted and brought forward by the community. Indeed, we feel that the real power of this Climate Emergency Declaration has been and will always be the leadership, engagement, and support demonstrated by our community in this effort. So with that in mind, we like to start these presentations by acknowledging some of the specific motivations that were explicitly referenced within the declaration itself, which does include a number of global events and major scientific reports. Next slide, please. So by referencing these reports and events, our community and council have clearly communicated a recognition of the overwhelming scientific consensus on climate change and a commitment to local action for the benefit of both the local and global community. The earliest event that is referenced within the emergency declaration itself is the Paris Agreement, which was adopted in 2015 by over 190 countries. Paris committed to keeping global temperatures well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and also had some language indicating efforts to try to limit that to 1.5 degrees Celsius. In June of 2017, the US announced plans to withdraw from Paris, and in response, many US states and local governments started stepping up to take the lead on climate action, making pledges to live up to Paris as a minimum. And Flagstaff was one such city. Indeed, in November of 2018, the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, which we often will refer to as the CAP, was adopted unanimously. Interestingly, 1 month prior to the adoption of the CAP, in October of 2018, the International Panel on Climate Change released a special report on the impacts of global warming above 1.5 degrees. This report compared the warming scenarios of 1.5 and 2 degrees and concluded that at 1.5 degrees of warming, the impacts and suffering will be significant, especially for the global poor. Following this report, limiting warming to 1.5, not 2, has become the global consensus target. And the final report referenced in the Climate Emergency Declaration itself is the November 2019 UN GAP report. This report concludes that there is a large gap between what countries have committed to in terms of future emissions reductions and that would be necessary to meet the Paris Agreement targets. If I were to put this in terms of temperature, the report concludes that there is an inadequate commitments are currently putting the world on track for a devastating warming of 3.2 degrees. Additionally, the GAP report concludes that there is relatively little carbon budget remaining, about 8 years worth of current emissions before we pass the threshold for 1.5 degrees warming and will not be able to go back. So again, by specifically referencing these events and reports, both the Flagstaff community and council have made clear their recognition of the overwhelming scientific consensus on climate change and have committed to local action for the benefit of both the local and global community. Next slide, please. So zooming in from that global perspective to a more local one, I'd like to take a moment to outline how the Climate Emergency Declaration came to be here in Flagstaff. It started in September of 2019. On September 20th, the Flagstaff community joined the global community in what was the global climate strike. There was a large event, this was before COVID, on the City Hall lawn, with hundreds of community members attending. There was music, there were signs. It was a big event with lots of energy. During that event, the Flagstaff community started gathering signatures. And 4 short days later, they had more than enough signatures to submit a citizen's petition to City Council, requesting that a climate emergency declaration be considered. This came before council for the first time in January of 2020. And after over 3 hours of public comment, it was unanimously approved to move forward. Just as resolutions have to come before council twice before they are officially adopted. There was a bit of a delay, but it did come back before council in June. And on June 23rd, 2020, council adopted the emergency declaration resolution unanimously. Next slide, please. So we've already discussed a little bit of what's in the resolution in terms of the motivations. This is the part of the resolution that describes the 8 major things that Flagstaff will do going forward. This is written in somewhat simplified language compared to the resolution itself. But the 8 points are that Flagstaff will dramatically increase ambition to fight climate change. It commits to a citywide transition, and really that it's a community-wide transition. So there have been some declarations in other parts of the country, other parts of the world that are only looking at the municipality. But our declaration is calling for community-wide considerations. It commits to educating all of the residents, especially the youth. It underscores the need for full community participation, recognizing that the municipality cannot do this alone. It's going to require partnerships with NATDA and other stakeholders within the community, certainly. It commits to keeping vulnerable communities at the forefront of decision making. It joins a nationwide call for mobilization, and indeed at this point over 1,800 governments worldwide have declared climate emergencies, and while Flagstaff was the first in Arizona to do so, Tucson has since followed our lead, which we're excited about. The 7th point here gets a lot of the attention. It advances the goals of the original Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, and is calling for carbon neutrality by 2030. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means and how that compares to the original cap. And finally, it calls on all governments to initiate the transition, recognizing Flagstaff needs to do our part, but that we can't tackle the climate emergency alone. Next slide, please. So since June 23rd, the Flagstaff Sustainability section has been tasked with advancing this initiative that was brought forward by the community. We have done a number of things, including revising the original goals of the CAP to be carbon neutrality by 2030. The original CAP called for an 80% reduction in emissions and was looking at a time horizon of 2050. So that's a pretty significant change. We re-engaged with the consultants that we worked with to develop the original CAP, just trying to crunch some numbers and get some preliminary targets so that we could have a discussion with the steering committee and with the community, just making sure we're talking at the right scope of action. We reinvigorated the CAP steering committee and we brought on additional representatives from the community that were involved in the climate emergency declaration effort. Based on the preliminary targets that we developed, we've been having conversations with the community, trying to figure out how to tweak these preliminary targets so that we have some Flagstaff specific strategies and actions. We've been working on informing the community and requesting input on next steps. We've had a survey out where we've received over 540 responses so far, and we've been engaging in lots of outreach and giving presentations much like this one all over the community. We presented to council on October 27th to provide an update. During that update, we gave an overview of all of the things that I just mentioned above, as well as giving a summary of the guiding insights that were provided by the steering committee, with an emphasis on the need to commit attention and resources to equitable systems level solutions that will benefit and be accessible to the entire Flagstaff community. One example of this thinking that we provided to council was when thinking about electric vehicles. And the steering committee really talked about this a lot. And while they recognized that transitioning to electric vehicles will be integral to reducing emissions, there was this sense that emphasizing electric vehicle adoption can be a distraction to other more impactful, equitable, and sustainable strategies. Therefore, the guidance given by the steering committee was for the city to make sure that our resources and focus should be directed to the harder work that will benefit and ultimately be accessible to the larger community, not just those that can afford electric vehicles. So rather than thinking about how to subsidize getting another car on the road, electric or not, the steering committee was suggesting that we focus our efforts on transforming our city to support biking, walking, public transit, and other forms of micro-mobility. This means rethinking mobility and will require changes related to infill and density and codes and lane conversions and things of that nature. So after providing the update to council, we are working on drafting a more specific plan that we will be presenting to the community, continuing to get input in the next couple of months. And we expect to be back in front of council for a more formal adoption in February of 2021. Next slide, please. So while giving these presentations to the community, we'd just like to make sure that we take some time to talk about what carbon neutrality is. And it's the idea of net zero emissions. And it is a little bit different than 100% reduction in emissions. And we just want to make sure that that point is discussed. We understand that by 2030, we are not going to be able to reduce our emissions all the way to zero. There will still be emissions coming out of tailpipes of some cars. There will still be some natural gas burned in our community. There will still be emissions that we were not able to reduce in 10 years. However, if we can measure those emissions, and let's say we do so in 2030, and we find that there were 211,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents emitted that year, then in order to be carbon neutral or net zero, that means we then have to reduce, remove, sequester, or otherwise offset 211,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. As long as what we are emitting is balanced by what we are sequestering or offsetting, then it can be said that we are carbon neutral. Next slide, please. So this graph is just intended to show how this new climate emergency declaration on carbon neutrality compares to the original climate action and adaptation plan. The black line at the top shows the emissions projection if we were to do nothing. Our baseline year for emissions was 2016, and you can see that this is looking at a time scale out to 2050. And with no action, we would expect that our emissions would rise over time with rising population, rising economic activity, et cetera. Emissions grow over time without action. The original cap was looking to reduce emissions by 80% by 2050. And so that's the yellow line that you see here. And then the red line that goes pretty steeply down is the new goal of carbon neutrality by 2030. It is a stark looking difference, certainly, but it also means that because we're talking about carbon neutrality rather than reductions only, there is a new sort of element to our thinking, and that is the carbon sequestration and carbon offsetting that was not part of the original goal. And that can be seen on the next slide. So this is one of the images that we've been bringing to the community to discuss just some preliminary reduction targets as well as sequestration in order to arrive at carbon neutrality. We have shrunk the time horizon so that it is now only looking at 2030. And again, we have our black line on top with the business as usual rising emissions. Everything from the black line to where the orange starts at the very bottom represents the reduction potential that we are looking at. And so these are all reduction goals up to from the top all the way to the orange. And you can see that this is thinking about things from a sector-based perspective. So that top blue line is recognizing that we can have a significant reduction in emissions if we are able to reduce the waste that is sent to the landfill, and if we were able to capture some of the landfill gas and use that for renewable energy. The next gray sections are looking at reductions from the transportation sector. And this is certainly where NAPTA is going to be heavily involved in the reductions that we hope to see in this community. The darker gray is talking about mode shift. And the first goal here is the idea of trying to reduce the vehicle miles traveled in this community by 50%. And hoping to do so by promoting things like biking and walking and public transit. There are also other strategies that could be considered. We've all gotten extremely used to working remotely, or many of us who have the privilege to be able to work remotely are commuting less. So we can see an opportunity for reducing vehicle miles traveled by 50% from a number of different strategies. The lighter gray is talking about reducing fuel consumption by the adoption of low and zero emission vehicles. The number you'll see here is 75%, and I think that does get a little bit misleading. It does not mean that 75% of the vehicles in our community need to be zero emission or electric vehicles. It's more so that 75% of the miles driven need to come from these low or zero emission vehicles. Therefore, electrification of fleet vehicles that drive a disproportionate number of miles will go a long way to this goal. And the same with buses. I know that NAPTA has a plan in place for electrification over the next 10 to 12 years. And even residential vehicles. You know, if a family were to have 2 cars, one electric and one not, and the electric one drives 90% of the miles while the other sits in the driveway most of the time, fuel consumption would have dropped considerably even without 75% of vehicles being electric. When you get into the green and sort of, I think that's a dark bluish color, we're starting to look at emissions reductions from our building sectors. So that's commercial energy, residential energy, as well as some industrial energy by having cleaner electricity and moving away from fossil fuels such as natural gas. We can also expect to see significant reductions in emissions. But ultimately, all of that reduction, which is pretty rapid, pretty fast, is not going to get us to zero. And that is where the carbon sequestration, that orange wedge that we call it, at the bottom comes in. Wherever our reductions kind of come up short, the gap will have to be filled by carbon sequestration. And we talk about these being preliminary targets. We recognize that we may have to turn the volume up or down on some of these. If we end up turning the volume down, let's say we can only get mode shift to be 40%, that means that the reductions that we have achieved will be less, and that the carbon sequestration obligation therefore will be higher if we're not able to capture those reductions somewhere else. So we think about these as kind of being turning the dials up and down, with carbon sequestration or carbon offsets being the thing that will ultimately hold us accountable to getting to carbon neutrality. Next slide, please. So the previous slide was sort of visual, and it's thinking about sectors. Another way that we are organizing our thinking is by what we call these strategic bundles. I present this here because it's one of the ways that we're talking to the community kind of on the large scale, what needs to happen. You know, these first 3 bundles that you see here are thinking about what needs to happen in the building sector. We know we need cleaner electricity. We know our buildings need to be more efficient. We know we need to be switching away from fossil fuels to that cleaner electricity. Bundles 4 and 5, again, are in that transportation sector. We discussed reducing vehicle miles traveled in those lower and zero emission vehicles. We know we are going to need to reduce our waste, and that carbon sequestration will ultimately be that thing that holds us accountable to carbon neutrality. Next slide, please. So the last couple of slides are just talking a little bit about our ongoing community engagement on this effort. We do still have the survey up, and it will remain up until December 1st. I believe the next slide will show the link to that survey, and just encourage anyone who hasn't taken it yet to go and take it. The survey will run through all of the 7 bundles that I just quickly touched on, so that folks are able to become just familiar with it and provide some of their thoughts and input on all of the efforts that we're going to be undertaking. We have been doing these monthly climate emergency forums, presenting to community groups. We were on the radio, we were in the newspaper. The survey and some materials are also available in Spanish. And I think that means the next slide. One more forward, thank you. And so this, I believe, is our final slide. It does show the link to be able to take the survey and is just a call for anyone, if happy to have presented to this group, but we also know that you all are plugged into the community in other ways. And if you have another group that you think would benefit from hearing this presentation, just ask you to invite us to present to that group. You can get in touch with myself or Jenny directly. We've also put up the contact information for our climate engagement coordinator, Jillian Goulet. And we really just want to keep talking to the community. So again, thank you for allowing me this space and time today. And I think the final slide just says thank you.
Thank you so much, DC. And hi, Jenny. It's good to have you both here. We're looking for any kind of discussion on this. So I'd just like to open that up to board members.
Madam Chair. I'll wait.
Vice Chair Peru.
Hi. Number one, I'm back at the office. Sorry about that. We had a fire drill.
Okay. You want to?
But I just wanted to thank our presenters. Of course, this information is very timely and always has been very, very important to the work that Mountain Lion does each and every day. And so much appreciation to the staff for continuing to be important messengers of a very important issue. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. DC, if you could clarify something for me if I heard correctly, but the plan is not solely geared at the Flagstaff, the entity of the city of Flagstaff as a municipality, but the broader community. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so given that, and sort of acknowledging some of the limitations that the city would have as an entity to, enforce, I know a lot of your ability is on the encouragement and rather the enforcement end of things in terms of like vehicle miles traveled and the types of transportation that people are using and things like that. How do you envision being able to significantly move the mark given the modes of transportation and the way people conduct their lives currently? How do you intend to be able to really significantly move the mark and not have to rely so heavily on offsets?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's an answer with a lot of parts. Certainly wanting to try to help design the community so that modes of travel other than single occupancy vehicles are a preferred way to get around, making micromobility available, easy, safe. And I think you all probably have more insight than I do into how to imagine getting more people on, buses and things of that nature as well. So there's going to be a lot that needs to be done. I think some of it will be, perhaps from an infrastructure standpoint that the city is involved in, creating bike lanes and other corridors to be able to make alternative modes of transportation the preferred method. And then, as you said, a lot of it's going to be on that encouragement side and showing people side. I talk a little bit about electric bikes as being something that I didn't understand or think about as being a vehicle replacement until I actually rode one. And so I think there's going to be a sense of putting in place some of the infrastructure, showing people and working with community partners to try to and having the conversations with the community about having less reliance on the single occupancy vehicle in particular.
Thank you, Dee.
Yeah, if I can jump into, this is Jenny Neiman with the city, just to kind of add on to DC's statement. I think, everything that DC said is true. And I just want to emphasize the need for really systemic change, right? And to your point, right, our section and the city right now works a lot on encouragement. We work a lot on, these are the reasons why it's really great to ride your bike or to save energy at your home, et cetera. What we will need to do as a city and as a community, right? If this is a full community commitment, we're really going to need to move into the systemic changes that really say, actually, it's easier to ride the bus than it is to drive for me today, right? How do we do that? How do we work with NAPTA, one of our Mountain Line, one of our most important partners, right? To say, yeah, we can make this so that this is the easier choice, right? How can we work so that someone renovating their home is the easier and better choice and frankly, the automatic choice to go with an electric, really efficient heater, right? Or heat pump. And so we need to kind of move away from, that encouragement to what DC is saying is, can we get an electric bike? Because that is the easy and the automatic choice. Because frankly, with encouragement and individual actions, it's not going to get there. And so it is a very big challenge, and it is something we're going to have to look at, the systematic change in most of the decisions we make. How do we make it so that the, climate emergency, the carbon neutral choice is that kind of automatic choice? So just a little bit more, but thank you very much for the question.
Thank you,
I
Jen.
appreciate your thought on that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Comments?
Madam Chair, Jim McCarthy.
Yes, Jim.
There's a lot of other decisions. Just to give one example, the density that we lay the city out in. If we encourage higher density in our building, that makes mass transit, bus transit, it makes walking, it makes bicycling more practical. And so there's an example of things that may not be apparently involved in the climate action, but actually are very involved. Because higher density makes a lot of other things practical that would not be practical if we sprawl out. Thank you.
Good point. And I'd just like to add that, we've had discussions about how even neighborhood bodegas have pretty much gone away. And in our planning of new areas of the city, which we will have an opportunity to do in the near future because of the sale of land. I believe it was 460 acres. That all of that is time to really consider the things that DC, you have said. How do we make our neighborhoods and our communities walkable and accessible to, just common needs, like where the school's located. So we will have opportunity for that too. I sure do appreciate the visual of carbon neutrality. I think that was right on in your presentation and very easy to understand. So I'd like to thank you for that. And if there aren't any further comments, I would love to hand this over to Vice Chair Peru.
Thank you very much, Jamie. I appreciate it. And again, my apologies for having to bolt when the fire alarm was off. But, it was a good drill. We haven't had a drill this semester, so we all did it right according to our safety people here. So
very good.
So I want to go back to the agenda if I could, because I had to bolt, but I want to recognize Jamie Whelan, because she turned over the chair to me today. Although when I bolted from the meeting, it was probably an indication that I didn't want to take over the chairmanship. But anyway, I want to appreciate Jamie for being our chair and for guiding us all for her tenure here on the board. She'll be with us at the December 11th meeting, so we will be able to give her a proper send-off. But I do want to appreciate Jamie for her work as chair on the board and for being our leader. So thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Steve.
And then also Director Babbitt may be joining us today at the end of the meeting, but this will be his last meeting too. And so at the appropriate time, I will be recognizing Mr. Babbitt for his leadership as well. So let's go on to the next item. So item number 7 is the consideration and approval of the first 2020 budget revision. And this is found on pages 28 through 31 of your board packet. And I'll call on Heather Dalmolin, our CEO, to present this item.
Good morning, Chairman Peru and members of the board. So I have prepared a staff report as discussed during the 2021 budget adoption to address the delayed pay for our exempt or salaried positions. So as you may recall, the budget was adopted with the outcome of the compensation study for exempt staff placed in a contingency line item so that if revenues did perform better than expected, we could go back and offer that pay change to those staff members. So I have received an update from the city. So wanted to, based on that action, to look at how we might be able to take action today to offer that pay change in that phased approach. And so again, to reiterate, exempt staff did not receive the identified wage change from the comp study. We did offer a 1% COLA in lieu of the change while we waited for updated revenue results. It was asked at the TAC meeting, so I will point out here, only exempt staff received the COLA. This was not a COLA across the board for all staff members. Hourly employees or other team members not in the exempt category did receive their full compensation change as identified in the comp study. So what was proposed during the fiscal year 2021 budget process is that if the transit tax performed higher than projected, higher than the April 2020 projections, then we could consider a pay increase for staff. And we proposed the breakdown that you see on the screen. So one, the revenue had to perform at 1% or more higher, and then it would be done over 3 different phases. We have reached the end of the first quarter of fiscal year 2021. So as of 9/30, and what we had said in the budget process is that staff who had a delayed increase could receive up to 50% of that identified increase effective October 1. And so I am here to recommend that based on the updated projected transit revenue from the city of Flagstaff. So as you can see in the red circle, that in fact fiscal year 2020 ended up 8% higher than that April projection. And over the next 5 years, that we are actually performing at an average of 3.8% higher than that April 2020 projection. This transit tax projection is for the quarter ending 9/30, was provided to me on October 21st by, sorry, my brain just took a break, by Rick Tatter of the city of Flagstaff. And I will report that TAC member Shane Dilley from the city confirmed that this information is accurate from his understanding as well. So to sum it all up, COVID projections said that our transit tax would decrease by just over $1 million, but as of 10/20, we're actually projecting to be up by over $500,000. So not only did we not lose $1 million, we're gaining $500,000. And then I will just point out that this is separate from the $7 million that we received from FTA. So that is money we are still using to offset our operating cost at this time, that 7 million from FTA. So any additional transit tax dollars go towards future transit provisions. So the recommended action would move expenses of 40,000 and change from our contingency budget line items to the various line items to support implementation for exempt staff and related expenses. Again, it would be 50% of the adjusted wage adjustment. I'm sorry, of the identified wage adjustment. We will reduce it by the 1% COLA that was provided on July 1. And that wage change would be effective October 1st. So there would be some retroactive pay as we're already in November. And with that, I'd be happy to go back over anything or answer any questions.
Thank you, Heather. Are there questions or comments from board members? Questions or comments?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead. Just go ahead, Jamie.
Wow, what good news. What
Right.
wonderful news. And I'm glad that, I think an important thing to remember is that we did increase our contingency during this time. And I really support you moving in this direction once you saw those numbers change. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jamie. Are there other comments or questions from board members?
This is Jim McCarthy. So the suggested wording of the motion that's in the agenda, does that take into account that 1% cost of living that will not be added?
Thank you, Director McCarthy. It does. So the total amount already reflects the reduction of 1% for the COLA that was given on July 1st.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jim, do you want to make the motion based on your question?
I can do that. So I move that we approve the first fiscal year 2021 budget revision for a total change of $40,438.88 to move 50% of delayed wage adjustments for exempt staff effective October 1st this year from the contingency to wages and employee-related expenses.
Thank you. Is there a second to Mr. McCarthy's motion?
I second.
Thank you, Director Whelan. Any other discussion from the board? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any members opposed? Hearing none. Any abstentions? Hearing none. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, item number 8, is to consider the 5-year transit plan. And this is found on pages 32 through 35 of your board packet for the staff report. And I will ask Busy Collins, our transit planner, to present this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Busy Collins, transit planner. At the October advance, staff presented on the current plan and reasons why we think the update is needed. And then we broke into small groups and asked what the board and TAC thought. And to summarize, we heard support for the timing of the update, for a public process to develop growth scenarios, to have information to enable the board to make a decision about a tax question in 2022, and support for frequencies identified in the 2017 plan. We also heard instructions, including to look for ways to provide coverage to underserved areas and areas of future growth, and explore how growth can fund coverage to new areas, to ensure a shelf life if the tax question is not 2022, but later. And so we did add an option for a midlife update, to examine non-tax models to pay for service growth scenarios, to tier funding options, to right-size the transit tax question, and to have a robust public process to build grassroots support for transit service growth. And this feedback has been incorporated into the scope of work. And if approved today, the next steps are for Mountain Line to release an RFP and ideally kick off the plan in January of next year. The board will be engaged early and often in the process. We hope to complete the plan in November of 2021 and seek board approval of the plan in December of 2021. And the grant application is not in the current TIP or STIP or part of the FY21 budget. And in accordance with the grant resolution, staff is seeking board approval for the CEO to execute any award. Mountain Line has funding available to do the plan now and will seek to leverage an ADOT 5305E planning grant to offset the costs, though staff believe the update is still relevant even if grant funds are not awarded. And additionally, the plan update is not included in the FY21 budget, and in accordance with the procurement resolution, staff is seeking board approval for the CEO to award and execute the off-budget expenditure as it is anticipated to exceed the $100,000 limit authorized in the purchasing policy. And with that, I'll answer any questions you may have, and I am looking for a movement here of an approval.
Okay, thank you, Busy. Questions or comments from board members? Question to staff. Can we handle this through one motion or do we need to have two separate motions?
One motion would be acceptable.
Okay. Comments or questions from board members based on the information in front of you? Okay, I will ask for a motion to approve the application for and the execution of a 5305E grant for the 5-year transit plan through MetroPlan in the amount of $273,000 and to delegate the authority to the CEO to execute the procurement for consultants to assist with the 5-year transit plan within the project budget, regardless of award of the grant. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Whelan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And who was that, Josh? Is that you? Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you very much, Busy.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going on to item number 9, which is the consideration of the Mountain Line Safety Plan, which is found on pages 36 through 37. And I'll call on Samuel Short, our safety manager, to present this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. So as outlined in previous progress reports beginning last year, the FTA required Mountain Line, as well as all other public transit agencies, to adopt a Mountain Line Safety Plan or a Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan by July 19th of 2020. So in the spring of 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic arrived, and transit systems across the country began to prepare their vehicles and facilities to provide safer transportation for our passengers. A few months into the pandemic, the FTA realized that most transit agencies would not be able to complete this safety plan due to other obligations stemming from COVID-19. So at that point, the FTA did extend the safety plan adoption date to December 31st, 2020. Having completed that plan, I'd like to give the board a brief summary of the key components of this safety plan. So this safety plan does establish who's responsible for safety within the organization, which is essentially everyone. It's a top-down safety plan, which means it starts at the CEO and ends at the newest person hired and just attending training. It also defines staff roles and responsibilities as it relates to training, or I'm sorry, as it relates to safety. So for example, the CEO's responsibility, one of her responsibilities would be to ensure that we have the funding and personnel to carry out this safety plan. Another key component of the safety plan is safety performance targets. These are established using performance data from the previous 5 years, such as accidents, incidents, and injuries. The safety management policy statement describes the organization's safety objectives and how we will achieve those objectives. So this also states that we all support safety management and that it is inclusive of all departments within Mountain Line. It also defines accountabilities and responsibilities of each position. So this is our risk assessment matrix, and this is part of the safety risk management process. So this component outlines how we will identify, assess, and mitigate safety hazards. So for example, if I receive a safety hazard from an employee through the employee safety reporting program, I could either take that to the safety committee, or I could take it to the CEO and general manager, depending on the severity. We would assign that hazard a hazard severity of consequences number, and we'd also give that hazard a likelihood or probability number. And wherever it ended on the chart, that would distinguish of how we mitigated that safety hazard, whether it be through the safety committee, or I would take it directly to the general manager because of the severity of the hazard. Another key component of our safety plan is the safety assurance portion. This safety assurance section outlines how we evaluate our compliance with policies and procedures, and also how we are mitigating safety hazards. And it also tells us if we need to change some of those policies and procedures or the mitigation strategies. We do such things as audits and investigations in the safety assurance portion. So this also allows Mountain Line to assess the effectiveness of current safety risk mitigations and our policies and procedures. So I'm recommending that the board approve the Mountain Line Safety Plan, or Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, as it's also referred to. And I'll take any questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Samuel. Do we have questions from the board on this topic? Comments or questions?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Director Whelan.
Sam, you just created this due to COVID, or we had a safety plan?
No, ma'am. The Federal Transit Administration required all public transit agencies to adopt this plan.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on how many vehicles we have in revenue service, or how many the agency itself has in revenue service at one time, dictates whether this plan has to have all the components outlined by FTA, or just the components outlined for smaller transit agencies, which we fit into.
So as I was looking through it, I didn't, and help me, I didn't see anything COVID specific.
No, ma'am. It's addressed like any other hazard.
I see.
We would take the hazard, assess the hazard, and then provide mitigation strategies for the hazard, which we've already done.
Yes.
And most of the things outlined in the report we have been doing already. We just have to put it in a formal plan.
I thought so. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Director Whelan. That does raise a question, though, and if we could just, obviously, since it's on the top of mind for many, with our COVID numbers increasing in Coconino County, Sam or Heather or both, can you comment on the barriers that were put in place and fabricated by our own staff for the drivers? And can you make some comments on how those have been installed and some just general comments regarding those?
Yes, sir. Our own fleet department did build safety barriers, which we could have purchased outside the company, but we chose to build our own. So the fleet department did build safety doors, which would keep the driver safe from anyone coughing or sneezing or anything else. And it also has to be opened by the operator from the inside.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
So if I can add, this is Heather. The one I would like to say, just to confirm for Director Whelan, the COVID response will fall under our emergency preparedness plan, which is still a work in progress. We're doing that in conjunction with County EOC and City of Flagstaff emergency team members. So just want to clarify that this is not meant to address COVID specific. This was a requirement pre-COVID. Secondary to that, the barriers have all been installed. We've been using them effectively for several weeks now. And I'd be happy to share more information on that. It's in my current events as well, but the barrier protects the driver during the boarding process and then swings open so that the driver is not trapped in their seat while they're actually operating the vehicle. It's been pretty well received. We've worked through some little minor adjustments, and we continue to work on a resolution to some concerns about glare. But the glare is about seeing in the back of the vehicle where the passengers are, and is not presenting a operational safety concern.
Okay. Thank you, Heather, and thank you, Sam. Any other questions or comments from board members before we ask for the motion? Okay, hearing none, the recommendation is to approve the Mountain Line Public Transit Agency Safety Plan as required by FTA. Is there a motion to that effect from board members?
So moved.
Thank you, Director Whelan. Is there a second?
Second, McCarthy.
Thank you, Jim. There's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion on the topic? Hearing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, and abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you very much, Sam. Appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we'll go on to item number 10, which is an update on the consideration of the DCC Downtown Connection Center update from Kate Morley, and this is on pages 38 through 39 of your board packets. Kate?
Thank you, Chair and members of the board. I wanted to just provide an update on the Downtown Connection Center because we have gotten underway on design, and so have some updates to provide related to that. But also, as we start to dive into design, start to see places where there are potential risk or decisions that need to be made. So just want to lay some of that groundwork for the board today, but I'm not seeking any specific direction at this time. A little bit of background. So we did formally kick off with AECOM and the architectural team. We have an internal team that meets monthly, as well as a variety of stakeholder groups. Our first stakeholders meeting was on October 27th. It was virtual. That committee includes members from the Southside Neighborhood Association, La Plaza Vieja, a transit rider representative, Downtown Business Alliance, chamber representatives, as well as some other staff members who aren't participating formally in the internal project management team. So we were very excited to have that meeting. We also had attendees from the city who were considering more, not from the permitting process side, but from more of the ownership side. Parks and Rec, who has said that they would offer to maintain civic space at the site on our behalf, and then Park Flag, who obviously has an interest in community parking at the Downtown Connection Center. So, each of these groups will meet about 5 times throughout the process to discuss site programming, and then also get into architectural features of the building as well. So a little bit of what that schedule looks like. The PAC, the PAC, is our internal group, our project advisory committee, and then the stakeholder working group meets shortly thereafter. And they will meet all the way through as getting through our zoning and environmental approvals, which is the schedule that you have in front of you. So a couple of the decisions that are starting to come up as we dive into plan sets are that we're realizing, even though that's a great parcel with lots of space, there's still limited space in terms of doing everything that everybody wants to do on the site. And at the same time that we also have a firm budget for this grant. So, Mountain Line doesn't have a different pot of money to tap into. It really is the 2 grants that we have received that are funding the project with very little wiggle room outside of that. And so ultimately, as we get into some of these programming decisions and pros and cons, it's a decision that needs to be made by the Mountain Line board through the budget and approval of the plans, and then also through City Council, who we have tentatively agreed with if we move forward with this site, would have the ability to review the plan sets as well. So that's in draft conversations, assuming that we move forward on this property. So with that, I want to give you a couple ideas of what we're talking about in terms of some of these decisions. So you can see here a rough layout of what we're talking about currently for the Downtown Connection Center, where you can see it's a large amount of area that we need for the bus space to maneuver very well on the site. And then there's also the Connection Center building itself, where it's labeled DCC. And then you see the Rio de Flag moving through there, which obviously provides some big site constraints for us in terms of where we're trying to locate things so as not to be building large structures over the Rio itself. And then you see the yellow circles, and those are really the areas where we feel like we have some flexibility and where that values trade-off starts to come into play. So the box on the right has things that could fill some of those yellow circles. There could be some mixed use, maybe some retail or food sales, arts and beautification opportunities. We want to make sure that we have good multimodal paths running through them, the opportunity potentially for Amtrak or other regional service providers to jointly locate at the site so that we're truly that connection center. But then the big one that's really coming up are between the potential uses for civic space and parking. And so there's about 100 and I'm going to say 75, that's not quite right, spaces on the property right now. The city is very interested in us reparking all the parking that's there, and I should say city staff are very interested in us reparking all the parking that's currently there. Southside Neighborhood Association is very interested in civic space and having this place be a very welcoming area. They're not that interested in parking on the site, and that's where we start to see some conflicts arise. And it's by no means is Mountain Line thinking there should be no parking on the site. We do believe that there needs to be some parking, but as we start to play with what the different uses of these areas are, that starts to come up. So those are some of the trade-offs that eventually will need to come to the board and to council ultimately for decisions on. And I expect that that will happen fairly soon with our board anyways. Council will take more time. So that way we can keep moving forward with programming the site and designing it. The other risk that I'll say is starting to arise is related to the Rio de Flag. And we've known that this is a risk on the property since day one, but really there are potential project delays on the Rio. The city is not sure on the timing, how long we're talking about, but we hope to have a more firm answer from the city over the next couple of months. And as there are delays in the Rio de Flag, there are also delays that could impact our building, because the idea has been that the Rio de Flag would be constructed and then Mountain Line would move in and build the DCC right after. So if there's small delays, it's not necessarily a big problem, but if delays become lengthy, that could be something that Mountain Line wants to find ways to overcome the risk or manage the risk. And one way that we have floated to the city as a potential option is to work with the Army Corps to advance this section of the Rio and the project timeline. And from the city's perspective, they seem quite open to that, though acknowledge it's really an Army Corps decision and not a City of Flagstaff decision. So we've engaged Nexus Consulting, Bob Holmes, who also is working with the City of Flag on the Rio project to help advance this conversation with the Army Corps through that project. And so no decision will be made yet, but that's just one potential way we could move forward. The other item that's coming up related to the Rio de Flag is we need to move out of the way for the Rio de Flag construction and then essentially move back over where the construction is occurring. And so AECOM put together a cost estimate for us of what that temporary location would look like. And the cost estimate is pretty high. And we worked early on to try to make the temporary site flow into a final design. And parts of it may work, but parts of it likely won't work. So some of this will be lost cost. The major cost is the temporary parking of the buses. City of Flagstaff Engineering Division has been really helpful on this and is helping look at this to bring down some numbers and ways that we might be able to reduce some of those costs, such as using some millings from projects that are slated to occur next year. They might be able to work with us to get us those and bring down some of those costs. So we're really, really grateful for that. We have abandoned the idea of locating the comfort station in the hub, now the Lumberjack across the street. We could not find a price that was agreeable. And we believe that we can get trailers on site for 2 years for about $81,000. So that's much cheaper than anything we would be able to do with the hub. So wanted to let you know that we're no longer pursuing conversations there. So with this, the other thing that could happen is if we could advance that section of the Rio de Flag, there might be opportunities to construct in a little bit different way that could allow us to not have to build quite so much of a temporary space, or that it would be shorter term. So those are all things that could be mitigated through that potential resolution. So with that, I know that was a lot of information, but I'd love to hear any feedback from the board on any of those items.
Thank you very much. Kate, can you go back and show the first slide? That one. I'm sorry, the one that one. I'm gonna open up for board member comments on this slide. I mean, one will lead to the other, but general observations, impressions from board members, please. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Director Whelan.
I know that it is imperative that those of us that represent our, the city of Flagstaff engage our city manager in a conversation and to make sure that our city manager knows the impacts of this decision that will possibly affect us and add $1.1 million onto, or close to that, onto the bill. And that if and when the first thing that is to be done is that section, so Mountain Line could get onto their building, is imperative. And so I would think that all of us as directors would, in any venue, try to advocate for this piece, even though it is the Army Corps' final decision. I believe that the city, and Kate, you've been working extremely diligently and well with all the players and all the partners here. But I believe we need a chorus of voices to say this would be the meaningful way to go, is if we could do this first part going under Route 66 of the Rio. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much. Other comments?
Jim McCarthy.
Go ahead, Jim.
I keep a list of things that I talk to the city manager about, and I just put that on my list. So when I have a meeting with him in the next week or so, I will definitely bring that up and emphasize it. Thank you for the nudge, Ms. Whalen. I do have a question. Has Amtrak shown any interest in cooperating with us as far as providing Amtrak station?
Yeah, we have had several conversations with Amtrak, and they are interested. It is in their hands right now. Their engineers are supposed to be looking at it and they wanted to initiate a conversation with BNSF. Ultimately, it will be BNSF's decision to allow
Amtrak to move their stop and what that would look like. They're a little nervous. Amtrak's going to ask them to essentially build a pullout for Amtrak so that their trains can continue to pass by. That would be about a mile of track and require another bridge or an expansion of the bridge over Milton Road. So I think a request like that could ruin the opportunity to co-locate. But Amtrak is looking at it, and we're hopeful that we can figure something out. I think it would be a great connection.
Thank you. Jim, other questions?
Yeah, I guess a final comment that it seems like, how can I phrase this delicately? BNSF has a lot of things they want. I'll leave it at that.
True. Thank you very much. Other comments? So I do have an observation. So when we look at the $1.1 million on the temporary accommodation, that is part of the overall project budget, correct? Or do we have separate buckets that are funding?
We would be looking to pay for that out of the grant, so it would reduce our funding for the long-term facility. We don't have additional money identified for the temporary piece. The one thing I will say is that we do have to determine how much useful life is left in the federal investment that's already been put in on this site. And then we do have to pay FTA back for their investment in the current DCC for the remaining useful life. I don't anticipate it'll be that much money, likely about $100,000 or so payback that has to be local money to FTA.
Okay, and the reason I ask you the question about where the money would come from the overall project budget, because that would I think create a pretty important consideration when we're looking at programming. So programming opportunities, unless they're revenue neutral to us, we would have to be prioritizing what those would be based on availability of funds, based on what we need to do in the downtown connection center itself. While the programming opportunities may not be large ticket items, they could be depending on what those are. So I think just when we look at kind of making sure we're being realistic about reaching out to the neighborhood and the surrounding area and things that we would like to do and partner with the entities with, we would need to be, I think, very realistic about if funding is available, we could do some things. But again, I think that would be something we would need to consider going forward. Okay, other thoughts or comments? So I do want to pick up on Director Whelan's comment about we need a chorus of voices. Director, if I could ask you for when we talk about that, what would be the top message, and maybe this is to staff as well, what is the top message we need to be conveying as something for part of for that voice set of voices? So what is our biggest message relative to the temporary cost of the parking lots and all that?
Kate, do you want to go for that first?
Sure.
I know you have it pretty clear in your mind.
Yeah, I think so. We have been able to make a little bit of progress by approaching city staff about moving forward with the box culvert on this early if there's project delays. And staff so far seem quite open to that idea, but again, deferring to Army Corps. So I think the message really needs to be, that both these infrastructure projects are very important to the community. We need to be thinking of how to move them both together, in a way that is efficient for the taxpayer as well. And I think it's just about being partners at this stage and advocating for both projects and being creative to problem solve in the interest of the public and in the interest of public money.
Okay. Thank you. Amy, did you want to add to that?
I would like to, just with the previous presentation on carbon neutrality and what that would mean. So all of these pieces, I mean, it's really quite amazing how all of these pieces could come together if and when we work as partners. I agree with Kate. The message is both projects at relatively the same time move along and create this downtown connection center and pull the south side out of serious flooding. And then the next complement is the downtown visioning. And this is a piece of that. So I think all of those things coming together and being able to move people efficiently is very important. And so that's, I think, what I'm going to weigh in on when I also talk to our city manager.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Other comments? Okay, thank you. Kate, staff, does this provide a little bit more direction, or do we still need to provide?
It does. That's very helpful. I do think we'll be back in the next month or two with a more formalized programming list. And I do think that that conversation between civic space and parking will continue to remain on the list. So, I just encourage you to think it over. I'll be doing some outreach to try to get more input from both the business community and the neighbors, and working with Park Flag on some of the trade-offs as well. So I think no action at this time, or nothing needed at this time, but just to be thinking about that particular trade-off.
And to go back to,
Chair, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. I'll go after. Go ahead, Jen.
Kate, I'm wondering if you also have conversation with the downtown business, the DBA in their vision.
I think, and actually we're trying to schedule another meeting to talk about this. I think they really want both, right? They would like parking. We know that that's a big issue for them. They also want to see more civic spaces that draw more people to the downtown area. So I hope to have a conversation with them in the next 2 weeks or so, trying to get more information about what they really want to see.
Okay. And I would imagine that this piece would be going into the downtown vision. So it's very important what they want, what they want to see and what they're going to recommend to the city.
It is part of the downtown vision. We've been working with them. In fact, Mountain Line is a contributor to the vision planning process. And so we have a good relationship going with the downtown vision.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You bet. Kate, to that point though, for the parking that is currently there, is there an expectation or requirement that our final project has to not lose spaces?
So to be very transparent, initial discussions about this property with the City of Flagstaff staff, we believed that there was space to do the bus bays and repark all the parking. There is likely still space to do that, but one of the considerations is we may have to go vertical with the parking to do it, which becomes very expensive. It's estimated about $25,000 of space to build a parking garage. And so that's where some of those trade-offs, again, thinking about budget, start to come in, is if we have to go vertical with parking, it can be quite costly. I think there's still some things we can do to, get at least closer to the number that's there without having to go vertical. Right now, we've got about half the spaces in surface parking compared to what's there. I think we could do some things to get more uses of a DCC on a second floor, and so that there could be more ground level parking underneath it. So there might be some architectural things we can do to try to increase it. I also would like to look at Phoenix Avenue. Right now, we've got quite a bit of space dedicated to bus parking. There might be ways to restripe that road or do things where we could actually increase on street parking as well and try to boost capacity that way.
Director Peru?
Go ahead, Jamie.
It was this council that agreed that we still would like to give those 200 spaces of parking that were promised in a ballot measure. So if in the change of councils and leadership, that's another point that the city through Council Will has said that we understand that those spaces are still promised. And I wondered if that, this could be a partnership of city and Mountain Line when we talk about going up in a parking garage. So just a thought.
Okay. Jim, do you have a comment?
Mr. Peru, Jim McCarthy. May I make a comment?
Let's go ahead.
Yeah, that is an interesting thought. The city owes more parking, so maybe the city could provide some money if we were going to go vertical parking on this site. My other thought is that it's kind of ironic that here's a site that's dedicated to getting people out of cars, yet we would be providing parking to facilitate people staying in their cars.
Good observation. A little ironic there, isn't it? Okay. Jamie, can I ask you a question back on your comment about the commitment on a ballot measure for the parking, the number of parking?
Yes.
What ballot measure was that tied to?
Jim, do you remember? It was
Yes.
about the courthouse and
It was the
garage.
It was the courthouse. The courthouse a referendum, whatever it was, the ballot measure
Right.
for the courthouse did include language saying that there would be 200 new additional parking places provided somehow. And the problem is the city really doesn't have the money for that now. But in my mind, it's still an obligation that we need to figure out how to accomplish somehow.
And council made that commitment that we would accomplish that. And I think in the time being, what they're talking about is where the old courthouse was. They're going to make that a parking lot. They've also spoken with Senior Living, who will be building on the old Catholic school. And they will have a parking lot there that the city would lease a floor from them. But even after all of that, we're still in arrears. And that's what council was pretty clear on, that we need to make this right, because in the ballot language, it was clear that that's, I remember voting because of the parking garage. So that was pretty clear. So unless new council changes that, staff have direction that needs to be part of Flagstaff's future.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure the Downtown Business Alliance will not let the new council forget.
I don't think so.
The promise was made, and it doesn't matter if we get a new council, the promise still exists.
Okay. Other comments before I want to make a comment on my impressions, but other comments from board members? Okay, seeing none. With regard to parking, it seems ironic that we would be looking at this project and trying to recapture 200 spaces of parking when we're building a transit center that is meant to reduce use of vehicles. And so I guess from my own personal standpoint, while commitments were made by council and other projects, I would really be disappointed if the group of stakeholders are looking at this project to recapture that. And so that's just my personal view relative to the type of project that we're envisioning here and the goal of reducing vehicle use by the product and the service that we provide. And so I just want to make that make that known and transparent from me as an individual. So, okay.
I agree with that.
I agree with that too, Director Peru. I think also we're looking at our tourism and coming into town and being able to open up the city a little bit more with providing parking maybe on the other side of the tracks. That's, you know, or something. I don't know, but I agree with your point.
Okay, great. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next item. We can continue and we'll receive this back from staff for further discussion. So we're going to go on to item number 11, consider the BRT, the Bus Rapid Transit Project in relationship to the Milton Corridor Master Plan, which tonight is an ADOT. Tonight's the ADOT forum. Yep, tonight at 6:30. So I'm going to ask, this is going to be going back to Kate to keep talking about it. Kate?
Yes, thank you. So yes, tonight is the Milton Corridor Master Plan public meeting. I encourage all of you to attend and hear more. And this is related to where we are in that planning process. I don't have a particular recommendation at this time, but ultimately the outcomes of the Milton Corridor Master Plan will impact the Bus Rapid Transit or BRT project. And so that's the conversation I wanted to have as we go into this last phase of the Milton Corridor Master Plan. I have included some potential actions the board could consider, though if there are others, are very open to other ideas as well. So a little bit of history. Mountain Line first identified the BRT in its 2013 5-year plan. In 2015, we received a grant to further study it through what's called the SPINE study, or locally preferred alternative. You may have heard that before. And then in spring 2016, we actually received a $2.1 million grant from ADOT's Transit Division for the project, with the support of FTA to enter project development for the BRT. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that phase means in a moment. After that, ADOT North Central, so this is a different division of ADOT, decided that they really needed a vision for the corridor before they could approve a bus rapid transit project, and so decided to kick off the Milton Corridor Master Plan. That happened in fall of 2017. The plan at the time was supposed to be completed in 2018. So in 2018, we followed along and formally kicked off the project development phase of the grant or the BRT for the grant that we previously had. About a year later, we ended up putting it on hold with AECOM. We really have not been making any progress on it, waiting for the outcomes of the CMP, which are now anticipated in January. The plan may not be finalized until after that, but ultimately they think that they'll have the recommendations early next year. And will remain on hold until we have enough direction to move forward with the BRT. Just a bit of a reminder about the BRT itself. The map in front of you shows the corridor. It goes from the medical center down to Woodlands Village along Milton Road. That's why this segment is so important to the project. We have identified 5 goals for the BRT. They're enhance, connect, develop, thrive, and sustain. And on the slide in front of you, you see some of the ways that we were measuring how well we met those goals through the BRT project. A little bit about the Capital Improvement Grant, or CIG program. This project is eligible for up to $50 million at an 80-20 split. CIG is a grant program of the Federal Transit Administration. If you look at the chart on the bottom, we are in the green box, or project development phase, after the first FTA approval. So we took the SPINE study to FTA, they approved, and then we partnered with ADOT for that $2.1 million grant to do project development. The next phase would be out of project development. We essentially have a 30% plan set that would go back to FTA for evaluation, rating, and approval. And then they would award us construction funding upon that approval. And so what FTA looks at in that next phase are the bullet points on the right side: mobility, environmental benefits, congestion relief, economic development, land use, and cost effectiveness. And so they are rating to make sure we get a high enough score between those categories to fund the project and determine the level of funding up to the $50 million available. The only requirement of a BRT, again, it's a toolbox of tools that we apply as makes sense to try to make the bus more competitive with the car. The only thing that's required is transit signal priority. So other things, whether it's a bus only lane or what your stations look like, can all have a lot of flexibility or be modified. We do have to do stations and we have to brand it uniquely. But the big one related to the corridor master plan is the transit signal priority. So going back to the corridor master plan, a little history there. So we developed a variety of cross sections over the past several years with a bunch of stakeholders, NAU, Coconino County, the Forest Service, Metro Plan, City of Flagstaff, and Mountain Line all sit on that committee. And then have worked hard on evaluation criteria to be ranking those different cross sections, and you'll see them at the open house tonight. Prior to tonight's open house, they've done one previous open house early on in the process. I think it was in the winter of 2017, 2018. They've also done one survey that came out recently on the Flagstaff Community Forum. And now we're entering the last round of outreach with tonight's open house, and then a survey that either was just released or is about to be released this week if you haven't seen it yet. And one thing that's clear through this planning process, and it makes sense, is the ADOT's North Central Division's priorities for the road that they own, this segment of road, is traffic operations. And that is what ADOT does. It is their main purpose. And so as we've talked about evaluation criteria as a committee, it's been very clear that North Central is focused on the traffic operations. And through that, because Bus Rapid Transit looks for ways to prioritize the bus and make it more competitive with the car, that tends to impact traffic operations. And so it's unlikely that the North Central District is going to support strong transit solutions like bus only lanes. And I will say even TSP is a question mark, because transit signal priority means that when you approach a stoplight with a bus, that the bus gets the green light earlier. It doesn't necessarily get it right away, or the green light's extended to let the bus go through. And that impacts cars, and there's no way to avoid that. So the scale of the impact from Mountain Line's perspective is pretty negligible. It doesn't take that long for a bus to move through. We're really not seeing, from our perspective, major impacts to traffic in the modeling. But again, ADOT's priority is traffic operations, and so any impact to them is significant. And so from ADOT has agreed to wait for public outreach to make a final decision, but prior to public outreach was proposing a no-build solution for the corridor. And so really saying that they're not seeing any improvements for the Milton roadway that are worth the investment that we could make in them. And ultimately, a recommendation like that is likely to come out or still be supported by North Central District. And if the BRT is to run down Milton Road, we do need the support of the district. And so that starts to beg the question of what does all this mean for the Bus Rapid Transit project? And really where I'm at as a staff person for Mountain Line trying to move this project forward is that we really need political support if the BRT is going to proceed. At this point in time, there's very little support from North Central staff. And honestly, even partner staff is kind of deferring to the process of the CMP to move it forward. And so, I really think that if Mountain Line Board would like a BRT to run as proposed down the road, that it needs political support behind it to do it, or else the project will fail. So a couple options are to stay the course and just wait for the formal recommendation out of the CMP. Another is to ask our council or other member agencies for that political support for the project. And a third option is potentially to say it's unlikely we're going to get support from the district. We recognize that their focus is car operations, and we could ask FTA to allow us to move the funds to a different project. It is up to FTA's discretion, but they are being quite flexible right now with moving funds between projects due to COVID. And so if that was the direction we would want to go, now might be a good time to do it, or soon might be a good time to do it because of FTA's flexibility. So with that, I just wanted to open up the conversation or answer any questions about where we are in the project.
Great, thank you, Kate. Comments from board members?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Josh.
Thanks for that update. I was wondering if you had an idea about the likelihood that we'd be able to move, or change some of the thoughts on actually being able to change some minds on actually being able to build something out?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it's not going to happen at the staff level unless there's support from above and there's a direction from above to make the change. And, I think ADOT tends to defer to their districts to manage the roads as they best see fit. And North Central has been pretty clear that their priority is car movements. We have, briefly discussed, could we move the BRT off of Milton Road somehow to get out of this dilemma? And really at this point, we're so far down the process with FTA, it starts to become a whole new project. And we think we would still have to abandon this project and essentially start a new study and reapply because it would be so different. There's no good backage roads that parallel Milton for running the bus down in an effective manner. It's better to just stay on traffic with Milton than try to use some of those back roads. I don't know if I answered your question, but those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that's very relevant. I mean, you have more of a history about what could possibly be done. So I think that's relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Other comments?
Mr. Chair.
All right, Jamie.
Number one, I think that this, when ADOT came before council and said, in the long run, we've decided not to do anything, but we'll give you little projects. I really was so taken back that I needed to keep my mouth shut for fear of what would come out. It's almost as if there is this stall. So things were moving forward. ADOT was supporting the BRT and $2.8 million, and then stop. We're going to do a study. And so after, I believe, 4 or 5 years of study, they're coming back and saying, well, we've done that study and we're not going to do anything, but we'll give you a turnout lane or something like that, which to me is, I don't know, do we just walk away from ADOT? Do we start thinking about, can the city take back that, 2 miles? So we can get something done. Are there funds out there? So many things come to mind because Kate, you're right. They're involved with traffic, and even the lights that change for buses threatens them in some way. So, I don't know. Do we just say, yeah, thanks for the study and let us move on to something way different? I'm not sure. But this is very frustrating, very frustrating. And we've been put on, Mountain Line and the city have been put on hold for 4 years, only to find out that the truth is they're probably not going to do anything but put a turn lane on Humphreys.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie. Other comments? Other comments? Question to staff. This is Steve, of course. Do we have the time frame of the So the corridor master plan, of course, the public hearing is tonight. And is there a date for results where, as a result of their public input, they're going to come up with a recommendation?
We're anticipating that would happen in January right now. So that would, the number one item on the slide in front of you would basically be a come back January or February with a better update on what actually happened based on the public outreach.
That's quick. Yeah, so if we were going to try to do some lobbying to get some political support for the project, would our best opportunity would be to go to the ADOT board to start with? Or is the project within their wheelhouse?
I think that's a really good question. Heather may want to weigh on this as well. I feel like the first thing we need is to know if council supports and the city supports and our other partners are still wanting us to proceed, because I do think to move the needle at ADOT could take a lot of will. And so, do people really believe in the BRT and want us to keep moving it forward? I think it's really the first question.
Heather, comments?
Thank you, Kate. So I just wanted to say that I have reached out to Greg Clifton on this issue as well, the city manager. And our real question is, what does the city want us to do based on what they want to do? So we really feel like our project's the BRT and we feel it's important, but ultimately the city has to make a decision about ADOT's report, because it's really about city infrastructure at that point and the road that impacts the city. We're about one component of that potential recommendation from ADOT. So I've really reached out to Greg Clifton to say, how can we support? What does the city want to do? But I asked Kate to go ahead and bring this today so that we could see, what does the board want us to do in regards to pushing the city to say this is or isn't a reasonable response from ADOT?
Okay, thank you.
Steve, can I make a comment, McCarthy?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I kind of feel like what we need to do is maybe get some of the leaders on this together and have a discussion. And one that we need to bring in would be the Metro Plan, or FMPO, as we affectionately used to call it. I had a conversation with Jeff Malbeck. You may have heard of him. Anyway, I think he's interested in pushing some kind of plan for Milton Road. So I'd be interested in some further discussions between him and maybe Heather and maybe the city manager and et cetera. So I'm not willing to give up on this yet. I think there's still some air in the balloon, so to speak. And people that like Jeff Malbeck that we may want to bring into this discussion before we make any final decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Other comments? So,
Mr. Director?
go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I think it's time that we get, I don't think council knows anything about this and how it will affect. So I think bringing that political pressure in that direction is a presentation needs to be made at a work session to city council. I think, I don't know how, Josh, maybe you can help us with this, but this is a benefit to NAU. And having your support to come in on that would be very appropriate, I think. So I think we need to get our partners together and present to council that this is we need direction. And is council willing to say, stay the course, ADOT, we want you to, and to bring pressure or not. But I think the entire council needs to be made aware of where we're sitting.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie. And I agree with the comments that, you know, we have the opportunity to engage the partners, Metro Plan, the city, NAU, even CCC, others, to talk about the benefits. And so, you know, we can work with staff to look at options or pieces of that. So presentation to city council, we can connect through city staff to see when we can get that put together. And it may be that we provide a presentation on behalf of multiple partners, so that it's a broader impact, as opposed to Mountain Line being the presenter. I'd really like it to broaden that, so we have different dimensions of the presentation created or presented by different partners. So that would be a good follow-up.
Excellent.
Okay. And for tonight, though, at the master plan, there is a public input Q&A session as part of that. Is that staff were, Kate and Heather, were you planning on making comments at that, to this effect at tonight's session too?
I don't know if we were planning on making comments. We're definitely planning on attending. And we do participate in the stakeholders, so we make comments every week on where we are. So they're pretty clear on where Mountain Line wants to be with this project and the direction that we want to head and our, you know, our needs of what a BRT are. But I do hope we have a strong public participation, and that, you know, it's a tough concept to grasp in a quick open house. So, you know, hopefully there's enough there that people can, you know, really sink their teeth in and weigh in on it, and that there is a lot of feedback provided tonight. But I think we'll be present in case something's misrepresented or we want to clarify anything related to the BRT.
Okay, thank you. Access. I'm just looking at the flyer right now to see that if they do have the project website and see the materials, including the presentation, which will be available from today on. So if we can maybe look at that material that's going to be presented tonight and see if there's absolutely no mention of transit at all, that would be a good opportunity to say, in looking at the materials that was prepared for this public hearing or this open house, there is nothing connected to transit on here, and why not? And so I think that would be a logical observation to make. And I will plan to be, I've got our own district governing board is meeting tonight, so I'm going to try and leave early so I can attend the master plan, the Milton Road master plan open house. But it seems like that would be a logical observation to make, is why aren't any transit solutions even mentioned in the materials? But again, I'm saying that not having seen the materials.
Yeah, a couple cross sections do show the BRT in it, so they're definitely shown in the cross sections. I'm not sure, you know, how much information is provided as to the backstory of why those cross sections look like they do. You know, but they are in the cross section, so I think it'll be in how it's presented verbally and that the information that's shared during that stage.
Okay, great. Thank you. Other comments? So I think we have a bit of a path going forward.
Yes, thank you. I have clear direction.
Okay, very good. Thanks. We're going to move on to the next item, which is item number 12, American Public Transit Association APTA Health and Safety Commitments Program. Jackie Lenners.
Actually, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, because based on time, we're going to go down to the next item, which requires action in case we lose our vote.
Okay, we're going to go on to item number 13, which is consideration of the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office request for service, and Stella Hollander is going to present this item.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. Stella Hollander, Mobility Planner with Mountain Line, and we are asking the board to to approve the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office service request to participate in the Mountain Line van pool program. So first, a little bit of background with the van pool program. So currently our program, all van pools must have an origin or destination in Coconino County.
And Mountain Line provides a $400 subsidy each month to each van to help lower the cost of the lease price of the van. That $400 is paid with grant funding, and Coconino County pays the local match on that. And we have a contract with Commute with Enterprise, which helps form the van pools as well as provide the vehicle that the van pool participants use. And so the Sheriff's Office has requested Mountain Line to participate in this program with 2 vans to support their employees. And the Sheriff's Office has stated to pay the local match as well as the fuel cost. And so Mountain Line has an adopted policy to consider such regional requests, and they are based on the following criteria. So first is the minimum requirement. So the first bullet states that the direct costs of the services are paid by the requesting agency. And so again, as I mentioned, both the local match on the $400 monthly subsidy as well as gas are going to be paid by the Sheriff's Office. The indirect costs are paid by the requesting agency. So Mountain Line staff has kind of reviewed what the indirects would include, and we've recommended that it's not needed since the indirects are very negligible. The third bullet is that the service request is consistent with NAPDA's mission, vision, and guiding principles. So I have several lists on here. So the first one is the mission, second bullet is the vision, and then the last 4 are some guiding principles that help support this request. The fourth bullet on here is that NAPDA can continue to meet all existing commitments to member agencies, and staff believe that the additional workload can be accommodated. Once the van pools are up and running, it's minimal staff needed to kind of maintain. Again, Commute with Enterprise helps with the van pools as well. So next is additional considerations. So does the requesting agency have long-term funding? So this service request, the Sheriff's Office has committed to pay for 2 years. After that 2-year period, it can be reevaluated. Mountain Line staff, the Sheriff's Office, as well as Northern Arizona Council of Governments, NACOG, they have been helping kind of shepherd this request along as well. So it can be evaluated after that period. That also aligns well with the funding opportunity to help fund the subsidy at $400. So we can see, after that 2-year period, if we want to potentially expand or continue. So the second bullet on here, so if no long-term funding, what are the risks? Again, the Sheriff's Office would only pay the local match on the Yavapai vans that are on the road. So if those vans disband or have trouble formulating, it would not disrupt Mountain Line's original program, and staff can continue to work on increasing the number of vans in Coconino County. So the third item on here, so if there are indirect benefits to NAPDA member agencies, if the service request is honored. So a van pool program in Yavapai County has been a topic and desire for several years. If this request is granted, it really just helps enhance the mobility and transportation options in Northern Arizona. It'll also help with employee traction and retention for the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office. And again, will be just a first step in starting a program in Yavapai County. So with that, again, staff recommends the board to approve this service request. And I did want to recognize that we do have Brian Silvernail from the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office, as well as Pedro Rodriguez and Todd Morris from NACOG who are attending. So with that, I'm open for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Estelle, and welcome to our guests for being with us today. Comments or questions from the board on this topic?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Is the purpose to transport staff, or is the purpose to transport incarcerated individuals? And does that matter?
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the question. So sorry if I was not clear. It is intended for staff, so employees of the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office to be transported.
Thank you.
Very good. Other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Josh.
You said that the policy says that the origin or the destination has to be in Coconino County. What is the origin for those two van pools?
Thank you for the question. So our current program, that's just how it works is for origin destination in Coconino County, but both these vans for the sheriff's office will be in Yavapai County strictly. So that's why the service request is brought forward, because it would kind of expand Mountain Line's boundary. And I believe the exact locations are still being kind of worked out, but they will be within Yavapai County itself. So it won't travel through Coconino County.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions?
Mr. Director,
Go ahead, Jamie.
I certainly would like to support the Yavapai Sheriff's Office in their request. And if Mountain Line staff and CEO and leadership feel as though this is something that is a positive mood and won't put undue pressure on them, I would like to move forward on this.
Thank you, Jamie. Would like to make that in the form of a motion?
I would.
Okay. So thank you. The motion is made by Jamie to recommend the approval of the agreement to provide van pool support services to the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it. Jim McCarthy.
Thank you, Jim. So there's a motion and a second. Other discussion by board members? Hearing none. The motion is made and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed to the motion? Hearing none. Abstentions? Hearing none. So the motion carries. And so sounds very good. And so to our guests from Yavapai County, thank you for being here. And we look forward to working with you on providing the support for this much needed service. And so again, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, and thank you for your consideration and approval.
You bet. Thank you. Have a great day. Okay, so do we want to go back to item number 12, staff, or do we want to go on to progress reports?
Director Peru, this is Jackie. I can just say briefly that I did send out a press release about this item this morning and the board was all copied on it. So as opposed to going through the presentation, you can read the press release and there is a link to our landing page for this program on our website. It's in the press release. So I won't take up any additional time, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there are.
Thank you. Any questions to Jackie on the safety commitments program, health and safety? Okay, hearing none. To staff, so we have progress reports. What I'm going to ask is if there are any, to the staff, are there any progress reports that you feel the need to bring to the board's attention, or can we look at those at our leisure?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the progress reports were all provided as information for you to review. We don't have planned presentations, so if there's anything that you read that you would like us to address at a future meeting, please reach out, let us know, and we'll add it to a future agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. So that brings us to the, let's see, items, let's see. Heather, did that include the delegation of authority and the summary of current events?
Yes, sir, that can include those two items.
Okay.
We up on the screen, Rhonda, did just show we did the pumpkin decorating, and then we also had a Halloween costume contest, just a brief view of our participants.
Shady looking characters here.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Okay, so we have our next board meeting is going to be on December 16th.
It's actually just been changed to December 11th.
Yeah, we changed it. Okay. So
Sorry, I had this done before then.
okay, so the next board meeting, December 11th at 10 a.m.
Correct.
Okay, and then also we did not have an opportunity to see Art Babbitt at the meeting today, so we want to appreciate his efforts on being on the county's representative on the Mountain Line board, and so if you have an opportunity to see him and thank him, please do so. And then, of course, let's see, items on the TAC meeting. This is the TAC meeting agenda. Is that what I'm seeing?
These are the slated upcoming items for December.
Okay. Got it. So y'all can see what's coming up. Questions or comments, let us know. If not, we have our next meeting. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting unless I hear otherwise. Anything else? So, okay, everyone, thanks for being here. Staff, thank you for doing all the work that you do. Board members, thank you for being with us and continuing to represent the areas that you represent so well. And then also to everyone, just kind of stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll see you in December. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.